We have a special speaker today, and Aiden Graves. Did I say it correctly?
Yes, sir.
And he's from the Mississippi Aviation Heritage Museum, which is over in Gulfport. If you haven't been there, he is going to make you want to come.
Hopefully.
Beverly had talked to Aiden many, many months ago and said, "Oh, he would be wonderful to talk to everybody." And so I phoned him up and he said he'd be happy to do it, but he seems to be always on the go, so it's hard to pin him down. But he was able to come, and he did email me his biography, but unfortunately I was busy last night and at a Bible study this morning, so I never got to look at my emails. So you're going to have to give a little bit of your own introduction, Aiden.
It's not.
Aiden is
It's not much.
you're the historian, right? For the
Historian, curator, and tour guide, and janitor, and cashier, and
Okay, so he wears a lot of hats,
yeah, I had to think about that one.
and since we're a historical society and he's a historian, we're in the right area, I guess. So I'll pass it over to you, Aiden, and
Yes.
take charge.
All right, sound good. All right, y'all. I promise that I am not a lost child who just found his way into the Historical Society. I am actually a historian over there at the Mississippi Aviation Heritage Museum on Pass Road, just south of runway 32. Now, you may be wondering, why on earth some 20-year-olds trying to talk a little bit about history? Like, how on earth does he know anything? This guy looks like he's just came out of the womb. Well, honestly, that's what a lot of people think. Actually, just this last week, I had a woman come in from Idaho, and she's like, what, like 12? 12 or so? No, 20, but close enough. My mental age is about 12, though. So, yeah, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself. So, grew up in Wade, Mississippi originally. Did a lot of my schooling in George County. Actually, I didn't do a whole lot of public schooling. I went mainly for homeschool and private school, but I just bounced around between so many weird schools that eventually I ended up just saying, whatever, well, I was good for my GED at Gulf Coast, and I got there at 16 and ended up with my associates by the age of 18, and I've been really doing this stuff ever since. I've always had a knack for history. It really started with my grandfather whenever he came back from Vietnam, and well, of course, whenever I was born, he passed a lot of that information on to me, and he had a love for history just like I do. And fortunately, he's not here really to see much of this anymore, but yeah, that's kind of stayed with me for a long, long time. And of course, when I learned about the Aviation Museum being open down here, I was like, okay, I gotta jump on this opportunity, get down on the ground floor of it, and well, go from there. And I've really enjoyed my time there, and I've loved telling people and about all of our cool stuff in Mississippi, especially aviation-wise, because a lot of people just think we're a bunch of redneck hicks who have no idea how a plane even works. But we actually have some really cool people, and I'll tell you about a couple of them today in my short time I have with y'all. But yeah, of course, with the people who also come into the museum have just amazing stories. I've met people who had family members who were in the Bataan Death March in World War II who survived Pearl Harbor. Actually, I got to meet Mr. Frank Emond, who was a Pearl Harbor veteran. Unfortunately, he passed away in Pensacola earlier, last year. That he was 104 at the time, was on board the USS Pennsylvania whenever they came in and started bombing Pearl Harbor. And he survived along with most of his shipmates, as the Pennsylvania was a bit protected in the dry dock, but it was amazing to talk to him, and we've met tons of other amazing people there as well. But anyway, a little bit about me. I did graduate about 2 years ago from Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. I am a Hall of Famer for MGCCC as well, with the George County Center. Ended up doing a lot of stuff with our Honor Society up there. Went to Denver, Colorado with a lot of my group. Got a couple awards from it as well. First awards that our group ever got for any projects that we did there. Actually started a brand new car show up in George County as well in Lucedale. It's called Cruising Christmas. So if you guys are ever up there around Christmas time, go check that out as well. Shameless plug over, by the way. But yeah, of course, came down here. I've been living here in Biloxi. Well, not here in Biloxi, Bay St. Louis. But I live over in Biloxi for the last about year or so, and finally got settled down. Finally starting to get out to more places, and well, now I do most of the work here at the museum in Gulfport. So a little bit about what we have at the museum. So as mentioned, I'm going to try my best to make the museum sound appealing, because it is a really amazing hidden gem that we have here on the Gulf Coast. Of course, I would say our best exhibit is going to be our Hall of Fame that celebrates all these amazing aviators that we've had here in the state of Mississippi, going all the way back to the very early days of aviation. Some real record breakers like the Key brothers from Meridian, who broke the world endurance flying record that still stands to this very day. And they flew over the city of Meridian for almost an entire month, which back then that probably had to be boring enough. Nowadays it probably still is pretty boring. I mean, I'm just like, hey, look, a tree. Hey, look, grass. Hey, road. Hey, that's the same road again. So yeah, it probably gets a little boring after a little while there. Then of course we have our namesake John C. Robinson, and I'll touch on his story in terms of what he did and how amazing he was, especially as a groundbreaking individual, in a minute, because his story is a bit longer. And of course, if I tried to go over every Hall of Fame member, I'd be here for about 5 hours, and yeah, probably all need to get back home for before then. But yeah, of course, we have other ones like Jesse Leroy Brown from Hattiesburg, first ever African-American naval fighter pilot in Korea. Of course, he is the subject of the movie and the book Devotion, if you have ever read or have watched that movie that came out last year. Then we have others that are a bit more interesting, like Roscoe Turner, who was known for his best co-pilot ever, which is, well, it was a pet lion named Gilmore. So if you ever see any pictures of Roscoe Turner, yeah, he had a pet lion with him that is now taxidermied, I believe. I can't remember where Gilmore ended up, but yeah, he's still there somewhere. But yeah, because everyone had to have a gimmick back in the early days of aviation to really grab the public's attention, because there were just so many wacky people back then just doing crazy things. It's like, all right, we need something to make us stand out. So for example, like the Key brothers, of course, they ended up doing the world endurance flying record. The Ole Miss was actually on display at the Smithsonian for a long, long time, but a couple of years ago, since the Confederate flag or the Ole Mississippi State flag was on there, they took it down for reasons. But yeah, we also have probably the most, I would say, eccentric individual of our Hall of Fame group, Willie Suicide Jones. Yes, that's the nickname he got. So he was one of the very first African-American, wing walkers. And of course, for being one of the very first, that means he was also one of the most dangerous, because he didn't believe in this thing called safety. So the only thing he would typically have on him is a parachute. So how he got the nickname Willie Suicide Jones is that, well, what happened one day is that he was, wing walking as he usually did, flying on along, and he was away from the crowd when he fell off the wing. So the crowd did not witness his parachute come out. So what happened was they figured he essentially, committed suicide. And of course, he ended up surviving, barely. And he actually kept wing walking all the way up into his early 60s. And he ended up living to be the age of 75. So imagine going to the cemetery, seeing that nickname. It's like, wait, 75 years old? Huh? Yeah. So we have some interesting individuals. But of course, we also have some really incredible individuals in there as well, not just the kind of weirdos from the early days of aviation. We have some important astronauts as well, from the Space Shuttle program and the Apollo program. So actually, the father-in-law to our executive director, Mr. Francisco Gonzalez, that is Stu Allen Rusa. He was on board Apollo 14. Unfortunately, he was the one who was stuck on the capsule, still going around the moon, while the other two had fun, played around the moon. So, but he was known for what we call the moon trees. So, with him being a smoke jumper in his previous career, what he did is that he came back up to, go to the moon eventually. So he was like, you know what can I do to, improve science and also, just kind of do my own thing, kind of pay tribute to my past. And, that's what he did. He brought up hundreds of tree seeds almost to the moon, around the moon, and into space with him. And whenever he came back, they did so many tests on these seeds, and especially now that they're all grown up trees by now, they did all these studies about these trees, and there's still no solid answers on them. You can find a lot of them over at the Infinity Science Center at Stennis. His daughter, Miss Rosemary, and Mr. Francisco Gonzalez, they go around the world still planting these moon trees. The cool thing is that this small little, I guess you'd say a seed that was planted way back then is now grown into a big plan for the Artemis program whenever they go back up to the moon here in the next about 5 years or so, is that they'll take up even more tree seeds to the moon to where they can do more, I would say, intrinsic scientific research on these tree seeds, see if anything actually does change, because, we still have no real solid evidence, because some have grown shorter, some have grown taller, some have not grown at all. There's really no way of knowing if that has any factor on the growth of these trees. Now, tree stuff aside, let's talk about another really cool guy, Fred Hayes. So I think we all know about Fred Hayes, Biloxi native, and of course was on board Apollo 13, the big oopsie in space. Which of course an oopsie in space is about 200 times as dangerous as an oopsie down here. So of course we all know the story about Apollo 13. Oxygen supply kind of went kaboom, and they had to figure out how to get back down without, turning into icicles in space. So of course he came back down, and well, I've met him a few times, and no pun intended, he is one of the most down-to-earth guys you'll ever meet. He really, one day, it was during our summer camp actually, I was heading out the door, and he brushed by me, and I wouldn't have no idea if he wasn't wearing the big old NASA jacket that he has, that he was Fred Hayes. Just looked like a normal guy, just going about his day. Just, that Fred Hayes? It was a pretty incredible experience to meet him. And also we have a couple more astronauts who from the space shuttle program that actually helped get that program off the ground. They were really intrinsic in getting on those first missions to, with the Columbia and Challenger programs, and also flew the very first space shuttle. Technically, it was only a glider, but the Enterprise, which is still on display, I think, in Cape Canaveral. I think it's the one that they had originally on display there before they retired out. So that's just some of our Hall of Fame members. Now, of course, our aircraft are rather interesting in their own right. So, of course, we have mostly old Cessnas and stuff like that. We have an old O2, an old Cessna 175, but we have my personal favorite. That is probably the wackiest plane you'll ever find, and I think you come into the museum, you'll be able to get a better look at it, because it's called the Woodpecker. So if you look at it from afar, it looks like, I'm not sure how much y'all know about just kind of general aviation aircraft, but it looks like a Piper Cub, a very basic, very robust aircraft, until you look down and you see 2 Coors Light beer cans as the exhausts. There's something a little fishy about that. And then you start looking around and you see the paint looks a bit weird, and then you look at the landing light, and that's just a jerry-rigged flashlight. Huh. You keep going and going, you start looking through some of the pictures, and you look inside the cockpit, and then you see an RC car battery there on the floor of the cockpit. So the Woodpecker was built on a budget. Anyone want to take a guess? I'll be the very skinny version of Bob Barker here. Anybody want to take a guess of how much that plane cost to make?
$300.
All right, add another zero. Yep, about $3,000 to $5,000 with the engine. Without the engine, you're looking at a very, very cheap aircraft. And this wasn't even the first time this man named Brian Austin made a plane like this. He actually made a twin-engine biplane for only about $5,000 this time around. So he made a lot of these types of aircraft, just kind of kit planes. And this actually started, I talked to his brother who came in 2 weeks ago, actually, to the museum to go check on the plane. And because unfortunately Brian passed away from cancer in 2019. So his brother came in to check on the aircraft, make sure we're taking care of it when nothing's broken yet. So he came in and we talked for a while, and he mentioned how, well, back in the day that he would have his corner for RC cars and trucks, and Brian would be over there messing with RC planes. So eventually they kind of swapped their stuff around, and that's how they kind of mixed their interest. So the avionics, I mentioned the RC car battery. So the RC car battery actually powered all the avionics on that plane. So of course the avionics are the things, the gauges that you look at to fly the plane and make sure, you don't crash. So yeah, imagine you run out of that battery just a little too soon. Not great, but he did end up winning awards for that Woodpecker design, probably just for the sheer fact that it made it up into the air at all. He did win awards for that at Oshkosh, which is honestly the most famous air show in the entire world, and at Sun and Fun, which is down near Sebring, Lakeland in Florida, another big air show as well. Won tons of awards, of course, outside of that, but it's just sad that Brian never really got to keep going, because he probably could have built, knowing him, he could have built a plane for about $10 and half a Big Mac and would have probably made it work somehow. Now, of course, moving throughout the museum, we have pretty much different sections for everyone else. We pride ourselves, I mentioned this before, that we pride ourselves on being an interactive museum, to where we can have kids that are about this tall or look like me. You have very small kids, and they can go in there, have a great time. And you also have anyone else who's more interested in the history side of things go in there and have a great time. So we have a lot of stuff that goes into the history of, well, pretty much everything aviation related here in the state of Mississippi, but we also have completely accessible exhibits like old Cessnas, as I mentioned, that are completely open for the kids to go check out. We have an old T-37 Tweet trainer cockpit for the kids to kind of see what it was like to have fun as a, I don't know, fighter pilot back in the Cold War, back before we had all these cool digital displays, back when everything was just tons of gauges and buttons and dials. And, well, we also have a really cool little air traffic control room, which is what I'm going into. We have a virtual flight radar as well, to where they can kind of see what's flying around the general area, if there's anything going in and out of Gulfport, to where they can go run outside and like, look, plane, and hopefully see it, because if not, that'd be kind of a bummer. And then you also have a virtual live look in at Los Angeles International Airport as well. So pretty much fun for everyone. That's what we try and go for. Now, of course, when you try and do a tour like I do with some kids, and they're a bit rambunctious and they're, you know, going to hit someone in the head with a Cessna, not fun. That is the pro and con of having stuff accessible and still connected, because we still have the flight controls connected to where, you know, people can see how it is to fly a plane and see how they move the controls. Well, you're not watching for little Timmy, who's going underneath the elevator there. Little Timmy might be a little shorter by the time he gets done with the tour. So, yeah, of course, we try our best to, you know, make sure everyone has a good time at that museum. And of course, I usually am the one who does the tours, and that's why I try and like this is my kind of main group that I like to talk to. More adults who like history. I'm not great with talking down to kids, which is unfortunate, because I'm going to Lynn Meadows on Saturday to talk to kids. Pray for me, everyone. Pray for me. So now, I mentioned John C. Robinson earlier. I mentioned how he was probably the most important one there at the museum. Now, how many of you have heard of the Tuskegee Airmen of World War II before? Okay, pretty much everyone. So, this man, John C. Robinson, is one of the key reasons the Tuskegee Airmen got that opportunity in the European theater in World War II. And he was from right down here, just off 31st Avenue in Gulfport, Mississippi. And I'll tell you a brief story of his, because if I was here for, yeah, we'd be, you can probably make a few books and a few more movies out of him if you want to, if you really want to stretch that out. But I'm going to try my best to speed through this, because I can look at the time and you want to make sure I can get through this. Tell you about John C., and of course you can go and see his full story at the museum. I'm really trying to get you to go to the museum, by the way. So, I'm going to tell you his story real quick. So, he was born over in the small town of Carabel, Florida, back in 1903. Now, he wasn't born to the most fortunate family in the world, but they were about, I would say, middle class for 1903 America. Unfortunately, when he was very young, his father did pass away, so it kind of forced the family to, well, move over here to the relatively small town of Gulfport, Mississippi at the time. So, whenever he was young, he witnessed, and if you guys know a little bit about your aviation history down here, we have Louis Armstrong International Airport. You may be wondering, what on earth does Louis Armstrong International Airport have to do with Mr. John C. Robinson? Well, so the airport code there is MSY, Moisant Stockyards. So Moisant is who we're going to focus on. So Mr. Moisant was one of these very early aviation pioneers, similar to the Wright brothers and similar to all these other, honestly, I would say you're bordering on the line between stupid and genius guys back then. It's like, we'll put a few sticks and a few controls together. What's the worst that can go wrong? There's a lot that could go wrong, turns out. So, Mr. Moisant was flying down here near Gulfport back in 1908, I believe. And what happened was, John C. was outside and he saw this flying contraption, was like, I want to do that when I grow up. And indeed he would. However, with him being African American, growing up in, you know, the South in 1908, that was going to be rather hard for him. And, well, he pretty much said, all right, come heck or high water, I'm going to do that. And most certainly he did. So fast forward till he was a very young adult, and he ended up going to Detroit to chase his dreams first, because, well, there wasn't really any aviation schools he knew about immediately, because there wasn't this thing called the internet. He was still about 80 years before that would happen. So he just went on the word of a friend. Was like, all right, I'm going to go to Detroit, start with the automotive industry, and see where I can go from there. And he was very good in that industry, until one of his friends at the factory said, hey, there's this really good flight school in Chicago called the Curtis Wright School of Aviation. You should try that out. So that's exactly what he did. He went over to Chicago and started talking to, well, some of the folks trying to get into that school. Well, of course, it still is the mid 1910s, or the later 1910s, and well, they still wouldn't let him in because of the color of his skin. So he ended up getting a job there as a janitor. So, with him being a very smart individual, what he did was that instead of just kind of sitting idly by and just kind of sweeping the floors and all that, what he would do is he would kind of eavesdrop in these classes, poke his head in from time to time. And unfortunately, one day, one of these instructors caught him doing this, and instead of throwing him out, getting him fired, pretty much ruining his chances of ever doing anything in aviation again, he actually invited him into his class, and he became the first ever black student there at the Curtis-Wright School of Aviation, and eventually he became the first ever black instructor there as well. As I mentioned, this is just the first two barriers he broke. Get ready. So, fast forward another probably about 10 years, and we're going to go all the way over to Africa. Once again, there's a lot of big jumps we have to make here because that's how weird this story is. So, everybody heard of the worst dictator in history, Benito Mussolini, before? Not the smartest guy in the world, right? Horrible choice in friends. So Mussolini was kind of butthurt that he didn't, that Italy didn't own Ethiopia, because at the time, every other country in Africa was under the real ownership of European powers. Voice crack. So what happened was that we had pretty much the last man standing, which was the Empire Ethiopia, which is ruled by Haile Selassie at the time. So Benito Mussolini was like, all right, I want that. That's mine now. I want that as my vacation home. And of course, this being 1935, really didn't have much opposition, since the Ethiopians had an air force of, take a guess how many aircraft they had.
One.
Okay, a little bit more than that.
Two.
Okay, dozen aircraft. Still, we have more aircraft at Keesler Air Force Base than they had in their entire. Actually, we probably have more military aircraft at Stennis at any given time than they had operational, because they had 12 in total. About half of those were in scrappy conditions, and very few of the soldiers in the Ethiopian military even had shoes. Most of them were going out barefoot or with wraps on their feet to battle. So, one day when John C. is over there having himself a good time at a party in Chicago, this random guy, who turns out to be the pretty much right-hand man to Haile Selassie, says, hey man, Ethiopia needs your help. We need a guy to command our Air Force. And pretty much John C. looks at him and is like, okay, you've had too many drinks. You don't want to show yourself at the door. But no, turns out that he was serious. And, well, John apparently had made a pretty big impression over there, hearing about how this black guy, was making his moves in the world of aviation here in America, which was very tough at the time. They needed someone like him over there. And, well, he took up the offer and he hopped on a boat to Ethiopia. Now, what happened after that was some more just incredible groundbreaking stuff that John C. ended up doing. So, what he ended up doing over in Ethiopia, he ended up commanding the Ethiopian Air Force for 2 years. He was not one of the commanders, by the way, to kind of sit back idly by and let his guys go out and fight for him. He actually went out on his own missions with his own men, and on unarmed aircraft as well, during the war with Italy. And a lot of these aircraft were unarmed. Pretty much all they have with armament is John C. Robinson and a revolver. That's about it. Which turns out in the world of dogfighting is not a great idea. Unless you're a really good shot, but I'm telling you, really good shot. So John C., he did like medvac missions, for example. He did communications runs between the capital of Addis Ababa and the front lines, and just a ton of other missions. He actually hit about 3 times during his time in Ethiopia. As I mentioned, he was not kind of the commander who's like, all right, you guys, have fun. I'm going to stay back here on my couch. I mean, my boardroom, yes, my boardroom. Totally not my desk back here, just chilling out. So, of course, it was a fruitless war, really. Back during the first war in the 1910s, they were more evenly matched. Whereas now you have Italy going towards how they were going to be in World War II with a lot more very modern aircraft, modern equipment, modern training. And the Ethiopians were stuck with, well, a couple sticks and a few decent rifles, pretty much. So it was a fruitless venture, so eventually John C. did have to be evacuated out of the capital and back to America. And, well, he wasn't really expecting much, because he was going to come back essentially a loser, because, well, he didn't protect Ethiopia from being invaded. Well, what happened when he came back to Chicago, he got a huge welcome home ceremony, especially from the black community there in Chicago. And, well, that's pretty much the peak of his popularity at the time because, well, it's the 1930s. In 1936, there's some more things happening, especially over in Germany. Anybody know what that was? So yeah, he kind of got lost in the news quite a bit, and even now, I mean, in public school, I cannot tell you a single thing that they teach you from the 1930s, maybe until September 1st, 1939, when World War II kicks off in Europe. That's about it, which is really unfortunate because you do have amazing things that happened in the 1930s outside of the Great Depression, which was not great. Well, Great Depression, not great for that reason. But you did have, of course, Amelia Earhart. You had John C. Robinson. You had so many other amazing individuals at the time that just got brushed under the rug, unfortunately. But John C., after World War II would come to a close, and of course, between that time, he would become an advisor to the Tuskegee Institute and actually fly his own plane from Montgomery to the Tuskegee Institute to prove to them that, hey, we can do this. We can have our really own aviation school. We are just as good as everybody else. We can make it in the world of aviation. And of course, fast forward a few more years, and that would be very important for the rise of the Tuskegee Airmen. Now, after World War II came to a close, and they told him he was too old, by the way, at the ripe old age of 38. Yeah. So they told him he was too old to fly. So after the war, he actually went back over to Ethiopia since, well, Haile Selassie regained power because Benito Mussolini was a little bit crispy at the time. It was a little bit toasty. So since Mussolini was no longer a threat, Ethiopia still returned to its empire state for the next I think Haile Selassie ended up ruling all the way to the 70s. He was around for a very long time. And, well, he ended up helping co-found, John C. Robinson that is, helping co-found the current Ethiopian Airlines. So they have done many tributes to him in terms of calling him the Brown Condor of Ethiopia, which is the nickname he received whenever, well, he first got to Ethiopia and helped, well, really save their keister, save their Air Force. And, well, he also helped train hundreds of pilots in Ethiopia, and whenever he was in the Army Air Corps during World War II, he also helped train hundreds of pilots here until it was found out that he was training black students and white students in the same class. So that's why they actually threw him all the way out into the middle of nowhere fields in Nebraska. It's like, all right, yeah, you can train the corn over there. It's just really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. Now, with Ethiopia, this is where he would also meet his end. So he was flying a just normal flight for Ethiopian Airlines outside the capital of Addis Ababa, and he encountered engine issues and crashed just outside. And even though the hospital there tried their best, he succumbed to his wounds and died at only the age of about 54. So he had a lot more to give to the world of aviation. It's really sad that he didn't get to see, well, even the Civil Rights Act in 1969. He could have very well been alive to see that, or he could have seen so many more things in between then. I mean, I mentioned Jesse Leroy Brown earlier from the Korean War. He's the first ever black naval aviator for the U.S. Navy. He could have seen that. Unfortunately, he saw the Tuskegee Airmen do their thing and probably was kind of jealous. It's like, wait, I'm stuck down here teaching classes and y'all are up there having fun? Come on. But yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of where his story ends. But if you want to learn more, here goes another plug. You can visit us at the Mississippi Aviation Heritage Museum and see his full story, and don't listen to me ramble on for another hour and a half. So,
How large a facility is the museum?
So we have tens upon thousands of square feet there at the museum. Not kidding, actually. So we have about, I think, 25,000 accessible square feet on the bottom floor, and we're working on our upstairs right now. Unfortunately, the grant we were seeking to help us out with the upstairs area fell through, so that's going to be delayed till about mid-2024. But hopefully by then they'll be open. We're actually working on a big Vietnam exhibit dedicated to our POWs over there as well, because Mississippi actually really had a lot to do with the Mississippi, well, I would say the draft especially. We were top 5 in terms of states when it comes to the amount of guys drafted during Vietnam. Actually, funny story about my grandpa. So he went out of Biloxi to go out on a little fishing trip. Well, when he came back and they were approaching dock, he saw some guys wearing some weird helmets that had MP on them. So they thought he was draft dodging. So yeah, they ended up yanking him off the boat, and well, well, eventually it was finally figured out that, hey, wait, there weren't any cell phones back then, so I did not know there was a draft coming up. So he got sent over there anyway, and I had to lug around M60 for a couple of years, but he made it back. So, hey, but that's just an interesting story there. But yeah, we have a lot of room there at the museum as well.
How many exhibits?
Oh, how many exhibits? Oh man, whew. I think we have about 20 galleries, 24 galleries.
When I'm looking
We
at
have a
your
lot.
website, it's amazing. The
Yeah.
website's just beautiful.
Well, I do wish we can update it a little bit, though. I do wish we can update it a little bit. But yeah, if you guys want to see what else we have there, I do run our social media as well. So mainly we're on Instagram, so you can see the pictures of, usually what I'll do when it's, kind of slow there, I'll go outside since we're right to the south of runway 32. And we have a wonderful view of any aircraft that come in there. And we'll have anything from commercial aircraft to civilian aircraft to just one-of-a-kind military aircraft that you'll never really see outside of those bases where they're usually stationed. Just a couple months ago, we had the Thunderbirds before they had their big air show, pretty much blow our doors off with no notice, doing some training. We were just there, doing the cash register, and yeah, right, yeah, it roused the building, and with the way the roof is, sometimes I'm like, stay up, please. So, but yeah, it's a really great spot, especially if you love aviation. Our plan is to one day have a little observation deck up there to where you can just go up there, maybe get like a little snack there as well, and just watch some planes. Because if you're up on the second floor, you can see clear as day into Gulfport International Airport. So,
How much does it cost to get to visit?
so adult admission just flat is $14, but if you are military, first responders, anything like that, or a senior, you are in for about 12. Or if I'm up at the front, you're getting in for about 10.
And you can have parties there too, is that right?
Yes, sir, you can. Of course, I'm not too up on the party information. I usually avoid those like the plague because children. Once again, I have to go be at Lynn Meadows on Saturday. Yay! So, yeah. But, yeah, if you want to know any information there, I can point you towards Francisco Gonzalez. He will know a little bit more about the parties than I do, but he's going to be out of pocket for the next few days because he just got back from Utah, and now he's about to go to Florida. So, I just think he's on vacation. But you can go with me.
Robinson's daughters are,
No, it's
Hmm?
a
no,
different.
not Sally.
No, you're thinking of Roberts.
Yeah, Mr. Colonel Lawrence E. Roberts of the Tuskegee Airmen, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's Robin Roberts' father, yes. And John C. Robinson is not related to Jackie Robinson. I had a kid actually come up to me, he's like, is that related to Jackie Robinson? It's like, no, it's not related to Jackie Robinson. That'd be cool, though. That'd be a pretty interesting through line right there, because I do like me some baseball. But, yeah, we have a lot of really cool stuff there. As mentioned, tens of thousands of square feet, tons of galleries, and some birthday parties if y'all are into that. I'm not sure why. Just don't bring some kids. Don't bring kids, please. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But, yeah, we do have some amazing stuff. And, of course, we also have stuff on loan to us. We have some decent networking with other museums as well. So you'll see some stuff that pop in for a little bit, some limited edition stuff. Actually, we have a really good relationship with Traintastic, if you guys know the Model Railroad Museum over there as well, just a couple blocks down from us. They made this incredible diorama for us of the Coast Guard Air Station that was in Biloxi. That was first built in 1934 and went to 1966. And it is fantastic. Just amazing diorama. Looks like you're looking back into the past. Yes, sir.
Do you have any history backgrounds from EAA chapters, which I was involved with a number of years ago for a very active EAA chapter?
I know the museum does have a connection to the EAA. I myself do not know.
Do you fly?
No, sir. I'm actually going to air traffic control, so I'm going to be the one bossing pilots around a little bit. So, yeah, hopefully. Got past the test first, so I got to be studying for that. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. I accidentally told them this. I accidentally did about 1,600 questions when I was supposed to do 100. My brain still hurts. So, yeah, that was a bit of a fun day, to say the least. But, yeah, I'm glad that you guys had me here today, and hope to see you at the Mississippi Aviation Heritage Museum, of course. So, thank you so much.